As president, I'll defend our cherished way of life.
These are images of Donald Trump's America today.
In Joe Biden's America, you and your family will never be safe.
America's always been full of hope and resolve.
Go and vote.
Good morning. I'm Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for The Washington Post, and welcome to First Look, Washington Post's one-stop shop for news and analysis on the most pressing political issues of the day. This morning, we're reviewing an action-packed week. Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination, the coronavirus stimulus talks, and of course, last night's dueling banjos of town halls, one for President Donald Trump, the other for former Vice President Joe Biden, the Democratic presidential nominee. And to get us started to talk about all of this is the Washington Post's White House reporter, Ashley Parker. Ashley, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
So on the town hall, these dueling debates, did the Trump campaign achieve its aims, scheduling the Trump town hall at the same time as Biden's?
Well, if the aim in some ways was to compete with Biden for airtime and overshadow Biden, I think, yes, anecdotally, more people seem to be watching the Trump town hall in real time than the Joe Biden town hall. The real question to me is, if knowing now in hindsight how that town hall went, if the Trump campaign is actually happy that potentially so many people watch that Trump town hall in real time.
You know, I'm glad you pointed that out because, earlier in the day, I sent out a tweet saying, let's be clear, the town hall format is not exactly the best format for the president because he's interacting with people and it's sort of his demeanor with people, as we saw in the ABC town hall a couple of weeks ago, is not it's not warm and fuzzy, shall we say. I'll put it like that. I'm bringing all this up because I'm wondering, from the Trump campaign's perspective, or actually from President Trump's perspective, which is better, a town hall or a campaign rally?
Oh, from Trump's perspective, there is nothing better than a campaign rally. Right now, his aides have tried to tell him in some ways, when there was this whole back debate about the debate, they've tried to convey to him that, look, right now, just about no cable network takes your rallies live, maybe Fox News for part of it, right? Depending on what the news is, depending on what time the rally is. But the sort of eyeballs you get from a debate or a national television event that you do just simply does not compare to you doing a rally or you calling into Fox Business News one morning. But for the president's own sense of self and what he loves to do, it's a rally. It's what he prefers.
I know he loves the rallies and he loves seeing the people and hearing the cheers and the applause and the laughter. But does the president actually enjoy taking questions from real everyday people?
He can. It depends on his mood. Again, there's something about the rallies being up on stage and the cheers and the adoration that he's always gonna seek and glean energy from. But depending on his mood, the president does sometimes like to take questions from the press, for instance, and mix it up. And it's not dissimilar to sort of real everyday Americans. Now, is there a difference between how Donald Trump generally is able to sort of express empathy and, Bill Clinton style, feel your pain when talking to an average voter compared to someone like Joe Biden or Bill Clinton? Absolutely. It's not where the president shines. But he doesn't mind it. And an interesting thing is that town hall he did yesterday, it really began with a kind of one-on-one interview, combative interview, relentless interview, almost like a debate with Savannah Guthrie. And at the first commercial break, a Trump aide walked out on stage and sort of pulled Savannah aside and reminded her that, hey, the terms are this is supposed to be a town hall with voters. So in that moment, at least, you had the Trump campaign eager to get back to voter questions, which again might not be where the president shines showing empathy, but they realized would certainly be less combative and less kind of relentless follow-ups that were getting the president in trouble than what he was doing in real time with Savannah, who did, it should
Wow.
be noted,
Yeah.
a fantastic interview.
Yes, I was about to ask you to dive a little deeper into Savannah Guthrie's questioning, but you just spilled a little tea there, which I missed because I haven't had a chance to read the morning papers. But the fact that the Trump campaign went out to Savannah Guthrie at the first commercial break and is like, "Hey, how about some questions from real people?" This gets to what I was going to ask you about Savannah Guthrie. And his experience, the president's experience with Savannah last night, to me, was akin to his experience with Jonathan Swan of Axios when they did that instantly epic interview where Jonathan Swan fact checked and pushed back on the president in real time. And I'm wondering, how does the president deal with something like that? Does that get under his skin to be interrupted and challenged like that?
I mean, I think you can just watch for yourself. The president is incredibly difficult to interview, but some people, most notably, as you mentioned in recent memory, Jonathan Swan and Savannah Guthrie, have been successful in that. Savannah is, I believe, she's a former lawyer, and there's
Yep.
something about the president in his orbit generally. One of the things you hear is that he's not challenged, right? He gets memos and briefings that support his worldview, and so when you have someone like Savannah she was polite, she was cheerful, but she was also relentless, and she was armed with the facts and could go back to him time and time again when he didn't answer, to push him politely, but to push him, or when he said a fact that was wrong, when he misconstrued a study, to say,
Hmm.
hey, wait a minute, this is actually what you're saying, and here's why it's wrong. It does frustrate him a little bit, but more than frustrating him, what was interesting is it elicits answers actually for the public that we don't normally get to see when we hear Trump's talking points. Often the mode is he gets a question and he sort of hears a keyword, and then he presses the button for, oh, black voters, here's
Right.
what I say about black voters, or, oh, the economy, here's what I say about the economy. And so to actually have that back and forth is fascinating and revealing.
One last question for you, Ashley. Do you think that Savannah Guthrie's rapid fire conversational approach to moderating revealed more about the president's lack of policy knowledge than previous formats?
Potentially. There were some policy questions he didn't not quite answer, but to me, the moments that really stood out were the moments when she pressed him on sort of his general reluctance to disavow white supremacy. When she pressed him on, why won't you just say QAnon is a crazy conspiracy theory? When she pressed him on, why do you think it's acceptable to retweet a conspiracy theory? And the president said, well, I'm just retweeting it. And Savannah said quite pointedly, look, you are the president of the United States. You're not a crazy uncle, at Thanksgiving who just puts stuff out in the ether. Those were the moments that stood out to me, and those are not policy moments, though I think you are probably right on the policy front as well.
And so, do you think? I know I said that that was the last question, but no, really, this is the last question. Now, technically speaking, there is a last debate on the calendar. It's supposed to be next week. Any reporting that you might have on whether that debate is actually going to happen?
It, it's a good question. The first debate was not good for President Trump. I will say President Trump initially thought the first debate was good for him, and his advisors kind of had to tell him otherwise. But this debate there's very few moments. There's 18 days left. This debate is one moment to sort of turn the tide. So if there's anyone who does not have an incentive to run out the clock, it's Donald Trump. He can sort of do his, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to do it. But at the end of the day, between these two candidates, if there is one of them who wants a debate, who wants a chance to perform better and mix it up and maybe change the momentum, it is Donald Trump, and his team should want that debate more than Biden's team right now.
All right. Well, Ashley Parker, Washington Post White House reporter, thank you very much for coming on. We're going to have to leave it there. Have a good rest of the day. All right, let's go over to the opinion side of the paper where we'll find my colleagues, Washington Post Deputy Editorial Page Editor Ruth Marcus, who actually is really here this time as opposed to my flub last time, and contributing columnist Hugh Hewitt. Ruth, Hugh, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so let's start by talking about last night's dueling town hall fora. The contrast was stark between the two town halls last night. But before we get into the specifics of all that, I'm interested in how you managed the simultaneous shows. Who did you watch, or who did you watch first, or did you flip in between?
Should I tell the actual truth?
No, tell the actual truth, Ruth. Go ahead.
Okay, the actual truth is that we had a rare moment where we went to a friend's backyard for dinner last night, and so I watched it all afterwards. It was a little bit problematic because I was programmed to have some views from what I had seen on Twitter, which I don't like, but I didn't have to figure out which I was going to flip through. We just had excellent chicken and squash and fruit dessert with our friends, and it was so great to get out. Free at last.
Yeah.
Well, I watched The President Uninterrupted with Savannah. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, and that was just better television. I watched Joe Biden's last half hour with Merv Griffin, George Stephanopoulos, and I watched on Twitter both of them.
You're dating yourself,
actually.
Hugh.
What's that?
You're dating yourself.
Yeah, I know. No one knows who Merv Griffin is. You're not allowed. But the last thing before I hosted the debate in 2016 that they said in my ears, no Seinfeld joke. The kids won't get it. So yeah, Merv Griffin is very old, but it was that style of format at the end of the couch. I watched Twitter through the whole thing for both of them, which is how I think a lot of America consumes the debate. And definitely Donald Trump generated the most positive and negative response.
Okay, well, that's true, actually, Hugh.
Yep.
And for my part, we were out socially distancing with some friends in their backyard, got home in time. And in having to choose between the two, we chose President Trump first, one, because it was only an hour and that we could pick up a half hour, the last half hour of Vice President Biden. But I have to be honest, I watched President Trump because I wanted to see how's he going to do in this format, because when he did the town hall with ABC, it didn't go so well. And also in looking at Twitter and the reactions to what Joe Biden was saying, it was, you know what, I actually don't need to watch the first hour of Joe Biden because I know with him, I know what I'm going to get. Calm, steady, empathetic. And when I tuned in a half hour later, that's what I got. And so I guess the question to the both of you is, from the president's perspective, was it the right thing to do this dueling banjos type town halls, he and Joe Biden up against each other, and did it serve his purpose? I'll start with you, Hugh.
Yes, I think absolutely. He never turned down prime time on NBC. I think he'll probably have better ratings than Joe. I'm unfortunate. I just am sad that the debate commission screwed this up. I think Steve Scully is a terrific, fair moderator. They could have gone forward. It would have been safe for both candidates. It would have been better to have them both there. I was listening to Ashley earlier. I think they'll have it last week. But he got to say the most important thing that needed to be said, which was Amy Coney Barrett is a great justice and she deserves the support. And I did not ask for anything. That was the most important thing he needed to say. And then he also gave Joe Biden 90 minutes in which to make a mistake as opposed to 45 minutes. He made a huge mistake talking about fracking last night. I think it's the hidden moment of these two dueling town halls when he said we're going to take 128,000 people away from fracking jobs and put them into capping wells. Well, you know what? That might make sense in the blue bubble, but in Western Pennsylvania, a lot of people are scratching their head, and they heard that is, we cannot vote for Joe Biden or we're losing our job. So I think it worked for him very well.
Ruth, before you answer, I mean, is the most important thing the president needed to say was that Amy Coney Barrett was the person for the Supreme Court? Shouldn't the most important thing the president have said was that white supremacy is bad and that QAnon is a totally nutso conspiracy theory, and I unequivocally say so.
Can I do something really crazy and disagree with both of you simultaneously? I think
Go
that
for it.
the most important thing that the president could have done and did not do was to speak to the undecided voters out there, the kind of voters who might be tempted to go with him this time, go with him a second time, but have been turned off by some of his behavior, who are worried about the economy, who are worried about COVID, and to give them a clear understanding of where it is he wants to take the country in a second term. I thought it was a really interesting question that Savannah Guthrie asked him towards the end. It might have been even the last question, where she talked to him about a second term and said, what would you do to improve? And of course, President Trump being President Trump, there is no room for improvement because he is perfect and he has done everything splendidly and like no one has ever seen before. And so he didn't do anything, I thought, to try to close the deal with those undecided voters. And while I was disappointed that we didn't have an actual debate between the two, I thought the contrast between the two candidates was really remarkable. There was a point at which Mercedes Schlapp, one of President Trump's campaign advisors, former White House advisors, tweeted about how Joe Biden was coming off as Mr. Rogers. And I thought, yes, actually, Mercedes, this is one of the rare times we're in agreement. We need a little bit more Mr. Rogers in our political life. We need some neighborliness. We need some calm. And I thought the contrast between the two candidates and their demeanors just said it all to voters.
You know, Hugh, are there any undecided voters? Because I actually don't believe that there really are any.
100% agree, Jonathan. We can hold the vote today. It's over. People have made up their minds. We don't know what they think. I went through the polling errors of 2016 from the last Real Clear Politics average. You know, they were off 6.7 points in Wisconsin 4 years ago. Chuck Todd has told me they've adjusted the model. They've worked very hard to sample rural America better. But again, I'm going to retreat to the only thing that might have changed people's minds this week is Amy Coney Barrett being as extraordinarily poised and persuasive as she was. I think the people who voted for judges last time are going to vote for judges again. And I do not believe that exchange. This is contra Washington, D.C. and Manhattan thinking. I don't think Savannah Guthrie moved the independents one way or the other either by going after what to many people's ears sounds like the Spanish Inquisition again on QAnon and on white supremacy, asked and answered. And I don't think that works with the independent voters who are worried about their jobs and getting sick. I just don't.
Well,
Go ahead, Ruth.
so it's the Savannah Inquisition, maybe not the Spanish Inquisition, and I thought she prosecuted it extraordinarily well. Jonathan, you suggested, well, I'm just going to continue to disagree with both of you, and I'll never be back here again.
You absolutely will.
Jonathan, you suggested that it was the format that was the town hall format is not the best for President Trump. That may be, but I actually thought he did fine with voters. I thought he seemed pretty responsive to and empathetic to them. But I thought where he was really tripped up was with the Savannah Inquisition. And I think an Inquisition is a really good thing. That's what we as journalists do. She asked fair questions, and when he didn't answer them, she kept on asking them. And on my list of flubs in that part of the opening, which is why the White House advisors and campaign advisors were so concerned about the opening, is his comments about his continuing refusal to answer questions about when he had last tested negative before he tested positive, his misstatements about masks, and his continuing refusal to do the presidential thing and exhort people to do the safe thing and to wear masks. His answer on his taxes and his acknowledgement that he owes $400 million to God knows who. He does, and God knows, and the IRS knows, but we, the American public, don't know. And he cleaned up his answer on white supremacy, finally and repeatedly, but then he opened up this whole crazy uncle, irresponsible front on QAnon, which anybody do not understand why he would twice defend QAnon as strong opposers of pedophilia instead of just saying, look, there's crazy things out there, and no, I don't agree with them. Maybe Hugh can answer why he didn't do that. So I thought that was where he really fell short. And yes, there are few undecided voters, but they are still wavering, and you still have to convince some people who may be rolling their eyes at him that they need to get out and leave. And I'm really curious about what Hugh would say about the answer from the president that I found most surprising, perhaps, which was when Savannah asked him whether he would like to see Roe v. Wade overruled. And instead of repeating what he has said previously, instead of repeating what is in the Republican Party platform, or I guess we don't have that anymore, we just have the Trump platform, he kind of demurred. Hugh,
well, I'll answer that.
On to that.
I must say, the biggest problem from last night is that the American people are upset with the media. And if, in fact, NBC, I don't know what they agreed to an off-the-top town hall from right to the voters, and it was 20 minutes of Savannah at the start, that will deepen the distrust that is felt by center-right America of big media. Like they now think big tech because of what happened with the Hunter Biden story. And I want to go there. I just want to note that it was censored by big tech. They have a great suspicion of elites, and they have a great suspicion of how that happened yesterday. And if Savannah was known to the president to going to be opening up with 20 minutes of straight interview, then it was fine. If they guaranteed the president a town hall and they didn't deliver it, that's not fine, because the American media has a credibility with the center right. Now, I just have to, I don't know what the answer is, but if you sit down and you are told, we'll go right to the voters, you prepare differently than if you sit down with Savannah Guthrie.
Jonathan, I need to jump in. I'm sorry. I know you get to ask the questions, but you, this president agreed to a set of rules. I don't know what the rules were agreed to, and so I don't know whether they followed the rules or didn't follow the rules. The reality is that I think you would agree that none of those questions was improper, off base, even immaterial. But even if they were, the reality is that the last person on earth who has the standing to complain about not following the rules in a debate or in a town hall format or anything else is Donald Trump, who did not follow the rules at the first, and I hope not the last presidential debate.
And again, we have to disagree about if you break the rule. I've interviewed Trump 24 times, and every time I come away with a Trump tattoo because he gets mad at me for something. I've got some big ones that, people forget. He's now the most hated person on Morning Joe. After I questioned him in 2016, he called into Morning Joe to make fun of me, and they had a good laugh. I get it, what he does, but rule sets are rule sets. And if they are given to the candidate, you ought to live by that with the candidate. If you go back and watch the opening of debate number 1, the first person to break the rules was the vice president, and Chris Wallace was a blocking back for the president through the entire debate. I'm just telling you what the center right thinks. And I believe that they walked away from last night thinking that the media will not give, has never given, and can never be expected to give the Republican candidate a fair set of rules.
Okay, Hugh, can we move away from the media criticism for a moment? Because we're not just talking about any candidate. We're talking about the sitting president of the United States, who should be prepared for anything and for any question. But let's talk about someone you've brought up several times now, Hugh, and that is Judge Amy Coney Barrett, who is the nominee to the Supreme Court. And since you've brought her up twice, Hugh, I'm going to start with Ruth and get Ruth to give us your views, Ruth, of how the hearings have gone, how Judge Barrett has acquitted herself, and what fears, if any, you have about a Justice Barrett.
The hearings have gone, I would say, as expected, which is largely unenlightening. That is not unique to soon-to-be Justice Barrett, but I think there's been, since Judge Bork's hearings, which were, to use a Borkian term, intellectual feast and really a rollicking good time, there's been an increasing unwillingness among nominees to answer questions. They only answer questions, I write about this in the Washington Post today, they answer questions only to the extent that they feel it's incumbent on them to do it because they need senators' votes. Senators have really allowed this to go way too far, in my view, though there are certainly questions that should be off limits. And Amy Coney Barrett came into the hearings understanding that she had the votes, and so there wasn't a lot that she needed to give. So she would answer questions about what foreign language she spoke, answer she studied French, who did the laundry in her house. She was a little evasive about that, I have to say. Whether she's a racist, she's not. Whether she likes warm puppies, she does. Me too. But she wasn't going to. There were two sets of evasions. One was, can you answer questions about this public issue? Answer, no, I don't do policy, and I don't do science, and I don't do things. And then the second one was, can you answer questions about this case? No, I can't answer questions about this case unless it's pretty much Brown versus Board of Education, because that could come before me. Nonetheless, having hearings is better than not having hearings. We got non-answers from her, which are very telling about whether she thinks Griswold versus Connecticut, which is the 1965 decision saying that, yes, married couples have a right to privacy in the Constitution to obtain contraception. She wouldn't say whether that was correctly decided because she said that's a slippery slope to Roe. Interesting that, for example, Chief Justice Roberts was willing to go there. And so to get to the third prong of your question, how worried am I about a Justice Barrett from my ideological point of view? Hugely worried about Justice Barrett. I wrote a book that Hugh's been nice enough to mention a few times about Brett Kavanaugh called Supreme Ambition, Brett Kavanaugh and the conservative takeover. If there was any doubt when Brett Kavanaugh joined the court about whether there was a conservative takeover, there is zero doubt now. Conservative takeover, mission accomplished.
Hugh,
I want to add here, I have in front of me Supreme Ambition. And I'm very glad the Democrats did not read this, because on page 70, Ruth underscored Judge Barrett's article on stare decisis. And if I had been the Democratic caucus counsel, I would have said, focus on this article, as Ruth did in her book, and repeatedly go to what binds and what doesn't bind. Be prepared to talk about Chief Justice Roberts' concurrence in Citizens United. It was the mind. There was one very interesting explication of an existing opinion between Dick Durbin, who did a fine job and stayed away from Catholicism, good on Dick Durbin, and Judge Barrett on her gun control case, and what it means to have a civic right versus an individual right. That was actually substantive, Ruth. I thought that was fascinating. But the Democrats were poorly prepared. I mean, they decided they would make this into an ACA rally. That case is not going to knock over the ACA. When it happens, they're not going to have much credibility left. But if they had read Supreme Ambition, they would have been much better prepared to give her a hard time. As it is, she's a great judge. She's going to be a great justice, and the Supreme Court's going to become very boring because they're going to go back to being judges and not legislators. And I, for one, am happy with that.
Ruth?
I am praying for boring, but I am completely praying for boring, but that it is not going to be a boring Supreme Court. It is going to be, I think, conservative leaning and potentially quite energetically so Supreme Court. And I think that the reason I think that the Democrats did a little bit of a better job, and including doing the questioning about stare decisis and the questioning about the decision in the gun case. But Democrats, when you have a hearing like this, you have to answer the question, what's your goal? And if was the goal to try to block Amy Coney Barrett's nomination? That wasn't going to happen. So if you know you're going to end up with the nominee getting confirmed, then you have to say, okay, what are the best politics for us? And here, Hugh and I actually agree that I don't think that the Affordable Care Act is in serious jeopardy of being entirely dismantled in the Supreme Court case that's going to be argued on November 10th. But I do think that as a political matter, trying to scare voters that is going to happen was not at all a bad strategy on the part of Democrats who had a losing hand to play.
I know you two could go back and forth on this all day, literally all day.
Yes.
But we don't have all day. We are out of time. Columnist Hugh Hewitt, Washington Post deputy editorial page editor and author of Supreme Ambition, Ruth Marcus. Thank you very much for coming on Washington Post Live's First Look.
3 for 3. Triple play.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Washington Post Live will be back at 1 p.m. Eastern this afternoon for the next event in our Voting Matters series featuring former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, Zach Carruthers from Portugal the Man, and Amy Lee from Evanescence. As always, you can learn more about these events and more at WashingtonPostLive.com. Once again, I'm Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post. For Washington Post Live, thank you for watching. Have a good rest of the day.